Ladies and gentlemen, meet my daughter. A total waste of good genetics. That was the first thing my father said into the microphone. He pointed his crystal glass of Chateau Margaux at me and smiled like a shark spotting a wounded seal in the water. The ballroom was bathed in a golden, expensive light, smelling of fresh lilies and the kind of perfume that costs more than my first car. She crawls around in filth taking care of society's garbage instead of carrying on my legacy, he continued, his voice booming through the high-end sound system. A tragedy, really. We tried to get her into med school, didn't we, Brad? But some people are just born to be bottom feeders. 300 guests laughed. It was a polite ripple of laughter at first, then it grew louder as they realized Dr. Marcus was performing. They thought it was a joke. They thought this was just another display of his charming, eccentric wit. They didn't know I had a wireless microphone hidden in the sleeve of my blazer. And they definitely didn't know I was about to turn his $25 million fundraising gala into a federal crime scene. I stood near the back, in the shadows of a massive floral arrangement. I wasn't sitting at the VIP tables near the front. Oh no. My father had specifically assigned me to table 30, right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen and the restrooms. Appropriate seating for a janitor, he had whispered to me when I arrived. I looked at him up on that stage. Dr. Marcus. The pillar of the community. The plastic surgeon who had sculpted half the faces in this room. He looked impeccable in his bespoke Italian tuxedo, standing next to my younger brother, Brad. Brad. The golden child. Brad was 32 years old, wearing a suit that cost $5,000, grinning that vacant, arrogant grin of a man who has never worked a single honest day in his life. He raised his glass to the crowd, basking in the adoration he hadn't earned. He was listed as the executive director of tonight's charity project. A joke. The only thing Brad had ever directed was a drug deal in a Wendy's parking lot 3 years ago, a mess my father had paid a very expensive lawyer to erase from the public record. But tonight isn't about disappointments, my father said, pivoting smoothly. Tonight is about the future. The Center for Dignity Recovery. A place where we can help the unfortunate, even if my daughter prefers to roll around in the mud with them. Another round of laughter. I felt the eyes of the people at table 30 on me. Pity. Amusement. Disdain. My hand tightened around my clutch. Inside, my phone was recording everything. Every insult. Every lie. For years, I had let this man define me. I had let him shrink me down until I was small enough to fit into the little box he labeled failure. He thrived on it. He needed me to be the failure so he could be the savior. He needed me to be the janitor so he could be the king. But kings get overthrown. And usually, they never see the assassin coming until the blade is already between their ribs. I took a deep breath. The air in the ballroom was cold, conditioned to preserve the thousands of dollars worth of imported flowers, but I felt a heat rising in my chest. Not the hot, chaotic heat of anger that makes you scream and cry. No. This was a cold burn. Ice cold. The kind of clarity you get right before you pull the trigger. I adjusted the cuff of my jacket. I checked the hidden mic one last time. Before I tell you exactly how I destroyed his career 30 seconds later, I thought to myself, let me ask you something. Have you ever been humiliated by your own family? Have you ever stood in a room full of people and felt your own father strip away your dignity layer by layer just for a cheap laugh? I want to know I'm not alone. I stepped out of the shadows. Where is she? My father asked from the stage, feigning a look around the room. Probably out back smoking with the catering staff. Willow. Are you there, darling? Or did you find a mop to push around? Brad snickered into his champagne. That was it. That was the moment. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I began to walk. The sharp click of my heels on the marble floor cut through the lingering laughter like a knife. Click. 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 It was a rhythmic, military cadence. Heads began to turn. The sea of black tuxedos and shimmering evening gowns parted. I kept my chin high, my eyes locked on the two men on stage. My father saw me coming. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, brighter and more predatory than before. He thought I was coming to beg. He thought I was coming to make a scene, to cry, to give him the hysterical woman moment he could use to discredit me further. "Ah, there she is," he announced. "Come to apologize for being late. Or did you come to ask for a donation for your little, what is it you call it? Your rehab center?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. I reached the stairs of the stage. A security guard, a beefy man in a tight suit, stepped forward to intercept me. He looked at my father for a signal. My father waved a dismissive hand. "Let her up. Let's see what the help has to say." "Big mistake, Dad." "Huge." I walked up the stairs. The lights were blindingly bright. I could see the sweat beading on my father's upper lip despite the air conditioning. I could smell the stale alcohol on Brad's breath from 5 feet away. My father looked at me, his eyes narrowing, expecting a tantrum or a tearful plea for respect. He expected the daughter he had bullied for 2 decades. He didn't get her. That girl died the night he threatened Grandma Rose. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He was too stunned to stop me. He actually let go. His arrogance was so absolute that he couldn't conceive of a world where I posed a threat. I turned to the crowd. 300 faces waiting for the punchline. "My father is right about one thing," I said, my voice steady, cold, and amplified to every corner of the room. The sound system was excellent. Not a tremor. Not a crack. "I do work with the state's most vulnerable," I said. But he left out my job title. I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was suffocating. I saw Mr. Thompson, the head of the city council, lean forward in the front row. "I am the senior program officer for the State Health Fund," I announced. "And I am the sole signatory with veto power over the $25 million grant Dr. Marcus has been begging for since January." The room didn't just go quiet, it froze. The air was sucked out of the ballroom. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot or a car crash. 300 people, holding expensive crystal glasses, suddenly forgot to breathe. My father's face went from flushed arrogance to ash gray in a single second. It was fascinating to watch. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The structure was still there, but the foundation had just been vaporized. He dropped his glass. It hit the stage floor with a shatter that sounded like an explosion. Red wine, Chateau Margaux, 2015 vintage, $600 a bottle, bled across the white stage like a fresh wound. It splashed onto his shiny patent leather shoes and splattered the hem of my trousers. I didn't look at the mess. I didn't flinch. "Willow," he whispered. It wasn't a question, it was a gasp. His microphone was gone, so only I and Brad could hear the sudden terror in his voice. "What are you doing? Give me that back." Brad, standing next to him, looked confused. His drug-addled brain was trying to process the shift in the room's energy and failing. "Dad? What's she talking about? What grant?" I ignored them both. I turned my back on my father, a gesture of disrespect he had never experienced in his life, and faced the audience. "You see," I spoke into the mic, my voice calm, professional, almost clinical. "Dr. Marcus invited you all here tonight to celebrate the launch of the Center for Dignity Recovery. He told you it was a revolutionary facility for the homeless and addicted. He asked for your donations. He asked for your trust." I reached under my arm and pulled out a thin, black folder. It wasn't a prop. It was death. I opened this folder this morning, I continued, holding it up. Let's talk about this proposal, shall we? Security, my father barked, finding his voice. He lunged toward me, but he slipped on the puddle of wine he had just created. He grabbed the podium to steady himself, looking clumsy, old, and pathetic. Get her off the stage. She's mentally unstable. She's off her medication. The security guard at the bottom of the stairs took a step forward, but then he stopped. He looked at Mr. Thompson in the front row. Mr. Thompson, a man who controlled half the zoning permits in the city, raised a single finger. Wait. The guard stepped back. Power recognizes power. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, the room realized that the power wasn't wearing a tuxedo. It was wearing a TJ Maxx blazer and holding a black folder. Sit down, Dad, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The microphone did the work. Unless you want me to read the section about the consulting fees paid to a Cayman Islands account first. He froze. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock, gasping, realizing the water was gone. He sank back against the podium, gripping it so hard his knuckles turned white. I flipped a page of the folder. The sound was crisp in the silent room. I did a line-item audit of this grant application this morning, I said, looking directly at the wealthy donors in the front row. Dr. Marcus is asking for $25 million of state funds, plus your private donations, to build a 50-bed rehabilitation facility. I looked at a woman in the second row, Mrs. Vanderwall, a philanthropist known for her kindness. Mrs. Vanderwall, you pledged $100,000 tonight, didn't you? She nodded slowly, her eyes wide, clutching her pearls. Well, I said, I think you should know that in the construction budget submitted to my office, 80% of the funds are allocated for facility upgrades. I let that sink in. Specifically, I read from the document, imported Italian leather furniture for the executive offices. Marble flooring for the private lobby. A private elevator for the director's suite. And a commercial-grade espresso bar. A murmur started in the crowd. Disbelief. Anger. Not a single cent, I said, raising my voice slightly to cut through the murmur, is allocated for patient beds. Not one. The proposal lists repurposed cot inventory for the patients. Lies, my father hissed behind me. She's lying. It's a draft. It was a preliminary draft. I have the time-stamped submission, notarized by your own lawyer, Dad, I said without turning around. Submitting a fraudulent budget to a state agency isn't a draft. It's a felony. I flipped another page. The sound was like a gunshot. Section 4, Administrative Transport, I read. $300,000 for 2 luxury SUVs for a nonprofit serving the homeless. I turned to look at Brad. He was pale now. He knew what was coming. Tell them, Brad, I said softly. Tell them why a director of a homeless shelter needs a Porsche Cayenne Turbo. Brad took a step back, nearly tripping over a monitor speaker. I need to do site visits. It's for safety. Safety, I repeated flatly. Funny. Because according to your driving record, which I also have here, you've had 3 DUIs in the last 2 years. The state doesn't buy cars for people with suspended licenses. The crowd gasped. The carefully constructed image of the Golden family was shattering into a million sharp pieces right before their eyes. This isn't a medical facility, I said, closing the folder with a snap. It's a retirement plan disguised as charity. It's a piggy bank for a son who refuses to work and a father who thinks the rules don't apply to him. I looked at my father. He was trembling. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The giant who had cast a shadow over my entire life was shrinking, melting under the heat of the truth. Dr. Marcus, I said formally. Your application is formally rejected due to gross financial mismanagement, nepotism, and attempted fraud. I dropped the folder on the podium next to him. You will never see a dime of state funding as long as I hold a pen. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy, final thud that echoed through the speakers. A harsh feedback squeal pierced the air, making everyone wince. I turned and walked off the stage. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the shock radiating off the crowd like heat waves from hot pavement. For 29 years, I had been the invisible girl. The disappointment. The janitor. But tonight, under the crystal chandeliers he paid for with money he didn't have, I was the only thing everyone could see. But as I walked toward the exit, my heart wasn't racing with joy. It was heavy. Because I knew this wasn't just about a grant. This was about a war that started 10 years ago, in a library that smelled of old paper and cruelty. To understand why I destroyed my father in front of 300 people, you have to go back to the fire. 10 years ago. I was 22 years old. I stood in the mahogany library of my father's estate, the House of Marcus, as he liked to call it. The room was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound books he had never read. A massive oak desk that looked like it belonged to a president. And a fireplace large enough to roast a whole pig. It was raining outside. I remember the sound of the rain against the tall windows, a relentless, weeping sound. I was holding a letter. My hands were shaking so hard the paper was vibrating. I got in, I whispered. My father was sitting in his wingback chair, swirling a glass of scotch. He didn't look up from his iPad. Into what? Another nail technician course. The Masters of Social Work program, I said, my voice gaining a little strength. At the State University. It's the top program in the country, Dad. I got a partial scholarship. He finally looked up. His eyes were cold, assessing. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate me. He looked at me with the same expression he used when he found a scratch on his Bentley. Social work, he said, tasting the words like they were spoiled milk. You want to be a professional handholder for junkies. It's about policy, Dad. It's about changing systems. I want to help people who help people, he interrupted, laughing a short, bark-like laugh. You sound like a child. Helping people doesn't pay for this house, Willow. Helping people doesn't buy you a seat at the table. You know what buys a seat? Power. Surgery. Legacy. He stood up and walked over to me. He snatched the letter from my hand. I told you the plan, he said. Nursing school first. Then you marry a doctor. Or you go into medical administration at my clinic. That is the path. I don't want to work at your clinic, I said, stepping back. I don't want to inject Botox into rich women's faces for the rest of my life. I want to do something that matters. His face darkened. Matters? You think this matters? He shook the acceptance letter. You think cleaning up the mess of the lower classes matters? You want to be a janitor for human refuse. Stop calling it that. I cried. It's my life. Not while I'm paying for it, he said softly. He turned and walked to the fireplace. The logs were crackling, bright orange and yellow flames licking at the soot-stained bricks. Dad, give that back, I said, panic rising in my throat. He held the letter over the flames. You have a choice, Willow. You can stay here, live in this house, drive the car I bought you, and do as you are told. Or... He let go. The paper caught instantly. The heavy cream stationery curled, blackened, and vanished into ash. My name, the university logo, my future, gone in seconds. Or you can go, he said, dusting the ash off his hands as if I were dirt he was cleaning away. But don't expect me to pay for you to ruin your life. If you walk out that door to pursue this hobby, you are dead to me. I stood there, staring at the fire. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart, that had been broken a long time ago by his constant criticism. It was my fear. I looked at him. He was smiling, confident that he had won. He controlled the money, so he thought he controlled the world. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just a girl who liked nice things too much to leave. You really think money is the only thing that matters? I asked quietly. It's the only thing that exists, he replied. Everything else is a fairy tale poor people tell themselves to sleep at night. I turned around. I walked to the door. If you leave, he called out, his voice turning nasty, don't come crawling back when you're starving. I won't give you a penny. Not for rent. Not for food. Not for a funeral. I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob. I won't come back, I said. And Dad? One day, you're going to realize that money can't buy the one thing you need. And what is that? He sneered. Mercy, I said. I walked out. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take the car keys. I walked 3 miles in the rain to the nearest bus station. I had $40 in my pocket, and a burning rage in my gut that would keep me warm for the next 10 years. He thought he had incinerated my future that night. He thought that by cutting me off, by refusing to speak my name for a decade, he had erased me. But fire doesn't just destroy things. It forges them. While he was building his empire of plastic surgery and vanity projects, I was out in the world, learning exactly how hard life could be. And I was learning something else, too. I was learning the laws. The regulations. The systems. I was learning how to hunt monsters. The next 10 years were a blur of exhaustion, hunger, and absolute, stubborn refusal to fail. I lived on ramen and spite. That's not a metaphor. For the first 2 years, my diet consisted almost entirely of 30-cent noodle packs, and the occasional apple one stole from the university cafeteria. I worked 3 jobs. By day, I was a receptionist at a grim little dental office. By night, I waited tables at a diner where the truckers didn't tip, and the coffee smelled like burnt rubber. And on the weekends, I cleaned houses. Yes, I actually scrubbed toilets. Just like my father predicted. I remember one Saturday, I was cleaning the master bathroom of a wealthy woman in the suburbs. I was on my knees, scrubbing the grout with a toothbrush, my hands raw from the bleach. I looked up at the mirror and saw myself. Tired. Pale. Wearing oversized sweats from Goodwill. My father's voice echoed in my head, a janitor for human refuse. I scrubbed harder. I scrubbed until the grout was blindingly white. I wasn't cleaning for them. I was cleaning for me. Every dollar I earned was a brick in the wall I was building between me and him. I put myself through night school. I earned my master's in public administration, graduating at the top of my class. My father wasn't there to see me walk across the stage. My mother had passed away when I was 12, and Brad was busy crashing his first Mustang. But Grandma Rose was there. Grandma Rose was my father's mother, but she was nothing like him. She was soft, smelling of lavender and peppermint candies. She had defied him to come. She took a taxi, hiding it from my father, and sat in the back row, cheering the loudest when they called my name. He's a fool, Willow, she told me afterwards, pressing a crumpled envelope with $50 into my hand. He sees the world in mirrors. He only loves what reflects him. You are a window. You look out. I used that $50 to buy my first professional suit for my interview with the State Health Fund. I got the job. Junior caseworker. I worked my way up. While my friends were going to parties or dating, I was reading tax codes. I was memorizing state statutes regarding nonprofit compliance. I became obsessed with the details. I learned that the devil isn't in the details. The devil is in the receipts. Meanwhile, I watched my family from a distance. Social media is a window, too. I saw Brad's Instagram feed. Trips to Cabo. New cars. VIP tables at clubs. He never finished college. He never held a job for more than 3 months. Yet, he lived like a prince. My father enabled him. He threw money at Brad's problems. DUI. High-priced lawyer. Drug debt. Check written. Failed business venture. Angel investment. It made me sick. But it also made me sharp. I saw the pattern. My father wasn't just generous, he was reckless. He was spending money to maintain an image of endless wealth. But I knew the plastic surgery market was saturating. I knew his overhead was massive. How long could the center hold? I rose from a caseworker to a district manager, and finally, 6 months ago, I was promoted to the state board. I became the senior program officer. It was a powerful position. I oversaw the allocation of millions of dollars in grants for community health initiatives. I had the power to say yes to dreams and no to frauds. I didn't tell my family. Why would I? To them, I was dead. To them, I was still the janitor. I kept my life private. I drove a reliable, 5-year-old Honda Civic. I lived in a modest, clean apartment. I saved every penny. I built a freedom fund. And then, one Tuesday morning in January, it happened. I was sitting at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee, scrolling through the digital stack of new grant applications. File number 20948, the Center for Dignity Recovery. I paused. The name sounded pretentious. I clicked to open the PDF. Applicant, the Marcus Foundation. Principal Investigator, Dr. Anthony Marcus. Executive Director, Bradley Marcus. My heart stopped. Then it started beating again, hard and slow, like a war drum. I stared at the screen. The audacity. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance. My father was applying for a grant from the very agency I worked for. He didn't know I was there. He thought I was, what? Flipping burgers. I scanned the document. It was thick, filled with buzzwords like holistic, empowerment, and synergy. It asked for $25 million to renovate an old warehouse into a luxury rehab center. I looked at the salary line items. Executive Director, Brad Marcus, $200,000. Brad. The boy who thought budget was a type of rental car. I could have rejected it right there. I could have clicked the big red deny button and sent a generic email. Dear Dr. Marcus, your application does not meet our criteria. It would have been efficient. It would have been easy. But it wouldn't have been justice. If I rejected him quietly, he would spin a story. He would blame bureaucracy or politics. He would find another donor to charm, another way to keep his house of cards standing. He would continue to drain the family resources, endangering Grandma Rose's care, just to fund Brad's lifestyle. No. A simple no wasn't enough for a man like my father. He needed an exorcism. I leaned back in my cheap office chair. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Hello, Dad, I whispered to the screen. I didn't hit deny. I hit approve for preliminary review. I was going to let him enter the trap. I was going to let him walk right into the lion's den. And he had no idea that the lion was the daughter he threw away. Once I hit that approve button for the preliminary review, the clock started ticking. But this wasn't just a waiting game. It was an investigation. I became a ghost in my own department. I recused myself from the official voting committee to avoid a conflict of interest on paper, but I kept my role as the final compliance officer, the person who vets the receipts after the committee says yes. It's a technicality, a loophole in the system that my father would have appreciated if it wasn't about to strangle him. I needed to know exactly how dirty this project was. The application looked slick on the surface. Glossy renderings of the building, flowery letters of support from politicians my father had donated to. But I knew where to look. I didn't look at the gloss, I looked at the garbage. I started digging into the subcontractors listed in the appendix. Contractor, Apex Consulting Group. Service, Strategic Visioning. Fee, $500,000. Strategic Visioning. That's code for paying myself. I ran a search on Apex Consulting Group. The business address was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Delaware. The registered agent. A lawyer I recognized. He was the same slimeball who got Brad out of his third DUI. My father was funneling grant money, taxpayer money intended for homeless veterans and addicted mothers, directly back into his own pockets. But I needed proof. Hard proof. The kind of proof that holds up in a court of law, not just in a family argument. I needed a witness. 2 weeks later, I sat in a dimly lit diner on the edge of town, not the one I used to work in but similar. Sticky tables, smell of bacon grease. Across from me sat Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable had been my father's office manager for 30 years. She was the one who bought my birthday presents when he forgot. She was the one who snuck me candy when he put me on a diet at age 10. She looked tired. Her gray hair was fraying, and she was clutching her handbag like it contained the nuclear codes. "Willow," she said, her voice trembling. You look strong." "I am, Mrs. Gable," I said gently. "How is he?" "He's manic," she whispered. "He's obsessed with this center. He says it's his legacy." "But Willow, the money. It's gone." I leaned in. "What do you mean, gone?" "The practice isn't making what it used to. The malpractice insurance premiums skyrocketed after the incident last year." She wouldn't say what incident, but I guessed a botched surgery. "He's leveraged everything. He mortgaged the house. The big house." My stomach dropped. The house. It wasn't just a pile of bricks, it was the only place where I had memories of my mother. He had bet my mother's ghost on this scam. "He needs this grant to pay off the loans," Mrs. Gable continued, tears welling in her eyes. "If he doesn't get the $25 million, the bank takes everything. The house. The cars. The practice." "And Brad?" I asked. Brad. She sighed. "He's already ordered furniture. He's treating the grant money like it's already in the bank. Willow, he's creating fake invoices. He made me type them up." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "I couldn't do it anymore," she sobbed quietly. "I retired last week. He didn't even give me a severance package after 30 years. He just told me to get out." She slid the envelope across the sticky table. "Here," she said. "Copies of the emails. The fake bids from construction companies that don't exist. The invoices for the consultants. It's all there." I placed my hand on the envelope. It felt hot. This was it. This wasn't just leverage, this was a smoking gun. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," I said. "You did the right thing." "He's going to hold a gala," she warned me. "A platinum gala. To celebrate the approval. He thinks it's a done deal because some politician promised him it would sail through." "He's wrong," I said. "He's invited everyone," she said. "The governor. The mayor. The press. He wants to be crowned king." "Then I guess I'll have to attend," I said. "He won't want you there," she said. "He hates being reminded of his failures." I finished. "Of his conscience," she corrected. I took the envelope and walked out of the diner. I sat in my car for a long time, just holding the papers. I had the power to stop him right then. I could have gone to the police. I could have sent a cease and desist. But then I remembered the fire. I remembered him burning my letter. I remembered him leaving me to scrub toilets while Brad drove sports cars. Stopping him wasn't enough. He needed to be exposed. He needed to feel what it was like to be powerless, to be humiliated, to be the joke in the room. He wanted a gala. He wanted a stage. I would give him the performance of a lifetime. For the next 4 months, I played the most dangerous game of my life. I allowed the process to move forward. I sent automated emails from the system, status update, pending final sign-off. It gave him hope. It gave him confidence. I watched from afar as Dr. Marcus spiraled into a spending frenzy. He was so sure the money was coming, a $25 million injection of cash, that he started spending it in advance. He booked the Grand Hotel ballroom, $100,000 deposit. He ordered cases of vintage wine. He hired a PR firm to put Brad on the cover of a local lifestyle magazine, under the headline, "The Next Generation of Philanthropy." I pinned that magazine cover to my wall. Brad, looking serious in a turtleneck, talking about dignity. It was nauseating. I also discovered something else. Something darker. In his desperation to secure matching funds, a requirement for the grant, my father hadn't just mortgaged the house. He had dipped into Grandma Rose's trust fund. The fund was supposed to pay for her care at the Kensington, the best assisted living facility in the state. It was untouchable. Or so we thought. I found the transfer records. He had moved her money into the foundation's operating account to show liquidity. He was gambling with his own mother's safety. That was the moment the last shred of hesitation left my body. If he lost, the money would be gone, and Grandma would be destitute. I realized I had to act fast, not just to stop him, but to save her. I secretly contacted the Kensington. I used my savings, my freedom fund, that I had built over 10 years of scrubbing floors and eating ramen, to pay for her room for a year in advance. I moved her under my legal guardianship, citing financial elder abuse to the social workers. It was a quiet, legal maneuver. My father was so busy tasting lobster for the gala menu that he didn't even notice the court notices sent to his junk mail folder. He was blind. His arrogance was a blinder that kept him focused only on the shiny prize, never looking at the cliff he was walking toward. Then, the invitation came. It arrived at my apartment in a heavy, cream-colored envelope with gold calligraphy. Dr. Anthony Marcus invites you to the Platinum Gala. There was a handwritten note on the back, scrawled in his sharp, jagged handwriting, "Come if you want. Try not to embarrass us. Wear something that doesn't smell like bleach." I laughed. A cold, hard laugh in my empty kitchen. "Oh, I'm coming, Dad," I said to the empty room. "And I'm bringing the bleach. Because I'm going to scrub this whole rotten operation clean." The night of the gala arrived. I put on my best suit. It wasn't Armani. It was a crisp, black pantsuit from a department store, but I had it tailored to fit like armor. I pulled my hair back into a severe bun. I put on red lipstick, wore paint. I drove to the hotel. The valet looked at my Honda Civic with disdain, as I pulled up behind a line of Mercedes and Bentleys. "You're a guest?" he asked, skeptical. "I'm the entertainment," I said. I walked into the ballroom. It was breathtakingly expensive. Ice sculptures. A 10-piece orchestra. The city's elite were there, sipping champagne and congratulating each other on being rich. I saw my father across the room. He was glowing. He was holding court, laughing, touching people on the shoulder. He looked like a king. He saw me. His smile dropped. He excused himself from a senator and walked over to me, Brad trailing behind him like a puppy. You came, he said, looking me up and down. And look at you. You almost look like a professional. Almost. Hello, Dad. Brad, I said calmly. Don't cause a scene, Willow, Brad sneered. This is big boy stuff. Don't ask for money. I don't want your money, Brad, I said. I just wanted to see the launch. The Center for Dignity Recovery. It sounds noble. It is, my father said, puffing out his chest. It's my masterpiece. Now go find your table. Table 30. Try to stay out of the photos. He turned and walked away. I watched him go. I felt the weight of the black folder under my arm. I felt the microphone taped inside my sleeve. Enjoy the lobster, Dad, I thought. It's the last expensive meal you're ever going to eat. Back on stage. Present time. The silence was still hanging in the air, thick and heavy. I had just revealed the $300,000 SUVs. The audience was in shock. My father was gripping the podium, his face a mask of terror and rage. He knew he was losing the room. He knew he had to stop me. This is absurd, he shouted, his voice cracking without the microphone. She's bitter. She's a failed social worker who is jealous of her brother's success. These are fabrications. I didn't argue. I didn't engage. I just held up the phone. Photos, I said into the mic. I have photos. I tapped the screen and held it up to the camera that was projecting the event onto two massive screens on either side of the stage. The AV guy, a confused kid who didn't know who to listen to, zoomed in. The screen behind me lit up. It wasn't a photo of a building. It was a photo of a wine cellar. This is the basement of the proposed center, I explained. As you can see, the medical storage room is currently stocked with 50 cases of Chateau Margaux and Dom Perignon. Paid for by the foundation's initial seed money. Gasps from the crowd. I swiped. Next photo. This is the invoice for the consulting work, I said. Paid to Apex Consulting. Notice the signature. It matches the handwriting on Brad's, let's call them legal settlements. Brad made a noise like a wounded animal. He covered his face with his hands. I swiped again. And this, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. This is the most important one. The screen showed a document. It was an eviction notice. This is a drafted eviction notice for the current tenants of the warehouse, I said. A local food bank that has served this city for 20 years. My father's plan involves kicking out a charity that actually feeds people, to build a vanity office where he can drink wine. I looked at Mr. Thompson in the front row. He was standing up now. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my father with pure disgust. You told the zoning board that the building was empty, Marcus, Thompson shouted from the floor. His voice carried without a mic. You lied to the council. It was a misunderstanding, my father pleaded, sweat pouring down his face. We were going to relocate them. Lies, I said. Just like the bed count. Just like the budget. Just like your entire life. I turned to the crowd. I didn't come here to ruin a party, I said. I came here to do my job. My job is to protect the taxpayers of this state from predators. And I am sorry to say that the man standing next to me is not a savior. He is a predator. I looked at my father. He looked broken. But there was still a spark of malice in his eyes. He wasn't sorry. He was just angry he got caught. You ungrateful little. He started to hiss. Save it, I cut him off. The grant is denied. The file is closed. And I have already forwarded these findings to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General. That was the magic word. Half the room stood up. These were people who had reputations to protect. They didn't want to be seen in the same room as a man about to be investigated for fraud. Purses were grabbed. Coats were snatched. The exodus began. No. Wait, my father cried out, reaching toward the retreating donors. It's a mistake. Don't leave. The dessert is coming. The party's over, Dad, I said. I placed the microphone gently on the podium. I didn't drop it this time. I placed it down with the precision of a surgeon finishing an operation. I walked past him. He grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. His fingernails dug into my bicep through the fabric of my jacket. You think you've won, he whispered, his face inches from mine. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. You think you can walk away after this? I will destroy you. I will bury you so deep no one will ever find you. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his eyes. I didn't pull away. I just stared at him with absolute, clinical detachment. Let go, I said. Or what, he hissed. You'll write another report. Or I'll show them the rest, I said. He blinked. The rest. The tax returns, Dad, I whispered. The ones you didn't file for the last 5 years. He let go as if my arm were made of burning iron. He stumbled back. I turned and walked down the stairs. The heavy service doors were ahead of me. I pushed through them, leaving the murmurs and the chaos of the ballroom behind. The air in the staff corridor was cold and smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. It was quiet. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was crashing. I had done it. I had stood up. I had spoken the truth. I just wanted to get to my car. I wanted to call Grandma Rose. I wanted to go home and eat a grilled cheese sandwich and never wear high heels again. But monsters don't just die because you cut off their food supply. Sometimes, when they are cornered, they get hungry. I heard the door slam open behind me. It wasn't a normal entrance. It was a collision. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The heavy, frantic breathing gave him away. You stop right there. It was my father. And he wasn't performing anymore. His voice echoed off the concrete walls of the service corridor, stripped of all its public polish. It was raw, ugly, and wet with rage. I stopped. I didn't run. I turned slowly. Dr. Marcus stood 20 feet away. The impeccable tuxedo was rumpled. His bow tie was hanging loose around his neck like a noose. His face was a mottled map of red fury and sweat. The veins in his neck bulged against his collar. He didn't look like a brilliant surgeon anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. Brad was behind him, looking terrified, holding his phone, probably trying to call his dealer or his lawyer, or both. You think you can walk away, my father screamed, marching toward me. You think you can come into MY house, in front of MY peers, and humiliate me? It's a hotel, Dad, I said calmly. And they weren't your peers. They were your marks. Shut up. He lunged forward, closing the distance before I could step back. He grabbed my shoulders and slammed me against the concrete wall. My head hit the wall with a sharp crack. Pain exploded behind my eyes. Hey! Brad shouted weakly. Dad, stop. There are cameras. I don't care, my father roared, shaking me. You ungrateful, treacherous little brat. I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me. By destroying my reputation. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And suddenly, everything made sense. For years, I thought he hated my career because it didn't make money. I thought he despised my choices because they weren't prestigious enough. But looking at the sheer panic in his eyes, I realized I had been wrong. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the grant. It was about the hierarchy. In his mind, he was the sun. And I was just a moon, meant to reflect his light or fade into the darkness. But tonight, the moon had eclipsed the sun. The waste of genetics had exercised power over the genius. The babysitter had fired the surgeon. It was a narcissistic injury so deep it was fracturing his reality. He wasn't angry because he was broke. He was angry because I had proven I was stronger than him. Your reputation? I asked, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with his hysteria. I didn't destroy your reputation, Dad. I just turned on the lights. If you don't like what people see, that's not my fault. He slapped me. It was a sharp, stinging blow across my cheek. My head snapped to the side. You are nothing, he spat. You are a janitor. A nobody. I will sue you for defamation until you are begging on the streets with the junkies you love so much. I tasted blood in my mouth. I slowly turned my head back to face him. I didn't cry. I didn't cringe. I smiled. It was the scariest thing I could have done. It confused him. He stepped back, his hand hovering in the air. You hit me, I said softly. That's assault. Add that to the list. I was disciplining you, he stammered, realizing he had crossed a physical line. I'm 32 years old, Dad. You don't get to discipline me. You get to go to jail. He laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. Jail? You think the police will touch me? I am Dr. Marcus. I play golf with the chief of police. You think a little report from a social worker is going to bring me down? He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. A cruel, twisted light entered his eyes. He had found a new angle. A new weapon. You want to play the villain, Willow? Fine. Let's see how much you love your grandmother. My stomach tightened. Leave Grandma out of this. Oh no, he said, tapping on his screen. She's part of this. I pay for her care, remember? I pay for that fancy room at the Kensington. $6,000 a month. He held the phone up. His thumb was hovering over a contact named Administrator Kensington. I'm going to call them right now, he threatened. I'm going to cancel the payment. I'm going to tell them to put her on the street tonight. Let's see how smug you are when your precious Grandma Rose is sleeping on a park bench in the rain. He smiled, a wet, slick grin that made my skin crawl. He thought he had won. He thought he had found the one button he could press to make me heal. Do it, I said. His smile faltered. What? Call them, I challenged him. Put it on speaker. He frowned. He dialed. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Hello. The Kensington, night desk, a pleasant voice answered. This is Dr. Marcus, he barked. I am stopping payment on Rose Marcus's room immediately. I want her evicted. Tonight. There was a pause on the line. Dr. Marcus, the receptionist said, sounding confused. I'm looking at the file here. Mrs. Marcus isn't listed as a resident under your account anymore. My father froze. What? Her account was closed last Tuesday, the receptionist continued. She was transferred. Transferred? To where? By whom? He screamed. By her legal guardian, the voice said. Ms. Willow Marcus. And the balance was paid in full for the next year, at her new location. My father lowered the phone slowly. The call was still active, but he wasn't listening. He looked at me with horror. You. He whispered. You stole her. I saved her, I corrected him. I moved her to the platinum wing. Paid for with my own money. My janitor money. She's eating lemon cake and watching Jeopardy right now. She's safe. From you. He looked at Brad. Brad shrugged helplessly. Dad, I didn't know. You took everything, my father whispered. My grant. My reputation. My mother. I took nothing that was yours, I said. I only took back what you tried to destroy. He stared at me, his chest heaving. The reality was setting in. He had no leverage. No money. No threats left. But he had one last card. Or so he thought. You think you're smart, he sneered, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You think rejecting one grant stops me? I have a black fund, darling. A rainy day reserve that you and your little bureaucrats can't touch. He walked over to a service cart that had been abandoned in the hallway, grabbing a half-empty bottle of wine. He poured a splash into a water glass and swirled it. Look at this wine, he said. I have offshore accounts. I have cash buried where the IRS will never look. You can't hurt me. I am the institution. He took a sip of the wine, his eyes locked on mine, daring me to challenge him. I didn't blink. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone again. You're right, Dad, I said, my voice cutting through his arrogance like a scalpel. You are the institution. And that is exactly why you're going to prison. I tapped the screen 3 times and turned it around so he could see. It wasn't a recording app. It was a call screen. Call in progress, 1843 contact, Special Agent Miller, IRS criminal investigation. He's been listening, I said. For the last 18 minutes. Since you started threatening me in the hallway. He heard the assault. He heard the extortion attempt with Grandma. And he just heard you confess to having offshore accounts and a black fund. My father looked at the phone. Then he looked at me. And for the first time, the shark didn't smile. The shark stopped swimming. The phone in my hand felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of the gravity of the man listening on the other end. My father stared at the screen. The time counter on the call was ticking upward. 1845, 1846. Every second was another nail in his coffin. Agent Miller, my father whispered. His voice was so small, so fragile. It was the voice of a child who had just broken a vase and realized no amount of glue could fix it. That is correct, Dr. Marcus, the voice boomed from the speakerphone. It wasn't the polite, customer service voice of a bureaucrat. It was the flat, iron-hard baritone of federal law enforcement. I am a special agent with the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. I have 2 local officers and a federal team currently entering the north loading dock of the hotel. Do not attempt to leave the premises. My father looked at the service door. He looked at me. He looked at Brad. It's a misunderstanding, my father stammered, addressing the iPhone in my hand as if it were a person. Agent Miller, we can discuss this. My daughter, she's mentally unstable. She's been off her medication. She fabricated those photos. This is a family dispute. We aren't moving based on your daughter's photos, Doctor, Agent Miller replied. We're moving based on the confession you just made regarding offshore accounts and the diversion of charitable assets for personal use. And, frankly, the assault on a federal witness. Assault, my father gasped. I didn't. I heard the blow, Dr. Miller said. And I heard the threat regarding Mrs. Rose Marcus. Attempting to use the endangerment of a dependent elderly person as leverage for extortion. That's going to make the bail hearing very interesting. Brad, who had been pressing himself into the corner of the hallway like a piece of mold trying to go unnoticed, suddenly peeled himself away from the wall. I didn't say anything. Brad shouted at my phone. You heard me, right? I tried to stop him. I told him not to touch her. I'm just the executive director on paper. I don't sign the checks. My father whipped his head around, staring at his golden child with disbelief. Brad? What are you doing? Shut up, Dad. Brad yelled, his voice cracking. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. Willow, tell him. Tell him I didn't know about the black fund. I just wanted to drive the car. I didn't know about the tax evasion. You signed the invoices, Brad, I said quietly. I have your signature on the Apex Consulting contracts. You knew. He made me. Brad screamed, pointing a shaking finger at our father. He told me it was standard practice. He said everyone does it. I'm a victim here. It was pathetic. It was grotesque. And it was deeply, deeply satisfying. For 30 years, my father had sacrificed me to build Brad up. He had decimated my self-esteem to inflate Brad's ego. And now, at the first sign of real danger, the golden child was eagerly tossing the king to the wolves to save his own skin. My father looked at Brad, and I saw something break in his eyes. It wasn't heartbreak, narcissists don't feel heartbreak. It was the shattering of his own reflection. He realized that the extension of himself he had cultivated was just a hollow, cowardly parasite. You spineless little worm, my father hissed. Please, I interrupted them. Save it for the jury. From the end of the hallway, the heavy metal doors banged open. This time, it wasn't a waiter. It wasn't a guest. It was four uniformed police officers and two men in windbreakers with IRSCI emblazoned on the back in yellow letters. The hallway felt instantly crowded. The smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner was replaced by the scent of authority, gun oil, starch, and inevitability. Dr. Anthony Marcus, one of the agents asked. He didn't wait for an answer. Turn around. Hands behind your back. My father didn't move. He stood there, frozen, staring at the cuffs on the agent's belt. He was waiting for the script to flip. He was waiting for someone to recognize him, to say, "Oh, sorry, doctor, right this way to the VIP lounge." I said turn around, the agent barked, grabbing my father's shoulder and spinning him. My father yelped as his arms were wrenched behind him. The click of the handcuffs was loud, mechanical, and final. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Better than any symphony. Better than any "I love you." And him, I said, pointing at Brad. Check his pockets. Hey. No. I'm the victim. Brad squealed as an officer patted him down. Subject is in possession of a controlled substance, the officer announced, pulling a small plastic bag of white powder from Brad's tuxedo pocket. And looks like 3 passports. 3? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Flight risks, the IRS agent muttered. Good call on the timing, Ms. Marcus. He walked over to me. He was a tall man with tired eyes, Agent Miller in the flesh. He looked at the red mark on my cheek where my father had slapped me. You okay? He asked. I've never been better, I said. And I meant it. The pain in my cheek was throbbing, but the pain in my soul, the 10-year ache of being invisible, was gone. We need to take them out, Miller said. The service elevator is jammed. We have to go through the main ballroom. My father's head snapped up. No. No, you can't. My guests, the governor might still be there. You can't take me out through the front. Take me out through the trash. Ironically, doctor, I said, stepping closer to him so he could smell the cheap mints on my breath, that's exactly what they're doing. I looked at Agent Miller. Lead the way. If you are watching this and you have ever felt like the smallest person in the room, I want you to close your eyes and imagine this next moment with me. Imagine the weight lifting off your chest. Imagine the fear dissolving. Because what happened next wasn't just an arrest. It was a parade. The doors to the ballroom swung open. The party was in chaos. About half the guests had fled immediately after my speech, but the other half, the morbidly curious, the gossip-mongers, and the slow to react, were still milling about in the lobby and the main floor, waiting for their valets or whispering in huddled groups. When we emerged, a hush fell over the room for the second time that night. But this silence was different. The first silence had been shock. This silence was judgment. My father was marched out first. The man who had entered this room 2 hours ago waving to admirers was now walking with his head bowed, his expensive tuxedo jacket bunched up awkwardly around the handcuffs. He tried to hide his face. He tried to look at the floor. But you can't hide when you are the center of the spectacle. I walked a few paces behind the agents. I kept my head high. I made eye contact. I saw Mrs. Vanderwall again. She was standing by the coat check, clutching her mink stole. When she saw my father in cuffs, she didn't look away. She looked at him with a cold, piercing disdain. Then, her eyes shifted to me. She didn't smile, but she nodded. A single, slow nod of acknowledgement. The janitor had cleaned the house. Dr. Marcus, a reporter from the local paper, who had been invited to cover the triumph, pushed forward, shoving a camera phone in his face. Doctor, is it true you embezzled funds from the homeless? Is it true you assaulted your daughter? My father flinched from the flash. No comment. No comment. Get that thing away from me. Brad, the reporter yelled, pivoting to my brother. Bradley Marcus. Do you have a statement? Brad was crying openly now. Snot was running down his nose, ruining his spray tan. It wasn't me. I'm just a kid. I don't know anything about business. Ask him. He's the crook. The crowd murmured. The betrayal was public now. The golden boy was tarnished copper. We reached the massive glass doors of the hotel entrance. The valet stand was jammed with luxury cars. Red and blue lights from the police cruisers were flashing against the hotel's limestone facade, painting everything in a chaotic strobe of color. It was raining outside. A hard, cleansing rain. The officers guided my father toward the back of a squad car. The officer pushed his head down, that universal gesture of "you are a criminal now," to protect him from hitting the door frame. My father paused before getting in. He turned his head and looked at me one last time. The rain was plastering his silver hair to his skull. His mascara, yes, he wore a little tint on his lashes, was running. He looked stripped. Willow, he croaked. Who will take care of the house? I stared at him. Even now, with handcuffs on his wrists, he was worried about the property. He was worried about the things. The bank, Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the rain and the sirens. The bank will take care of it. But your mother's things, he whispered. You burned my things, I reminded him. You burned my future in that library. You don't get to talk about memories. The officer shoved him into the back seat and slammed the door. I watched through the rain-streaked window as he slumped against the seat. He looked small. He looked like just another old man who had made bad choices. The monster was gone. They loaded Brad into a separate car. He was screaming for his lawyer, shouting that his father had coerced him. I stood on the curb as the convoy pulled away. The sirens wailed, fading into the wet night air. I was soaked. My hair was a mess. My makeup was probably running. My cheek was throbbing. But I felt light. Weightless. I turned to go back to my car, my reliable, dented Honda Civic parked way back in the lot. Ms. Marcus. I turned. It was Agent Miller. He hadn't left yet. He was standing under the hotel awning, holding a file. You did good work, he said. That folder you handed over. It's thorough. I've seen forensic accountants do worse work. I had 10 years to prepare, I said. We're going to need a formal statement tomorrow, he said. And we'll need to coordinate regarding your grandmother's assets. We want to make sure the seizure of his property doesn't impact her care. I already separated her finances, I said. He couldn't touch her trust if he tried. But thank you. He smiled, a rare, tired smile. You know, usually in these cases, the family protects the patriarch. They circle the wagons. It takes a lot of guts to be the one to light the match. I didn't light the match, Agent Miller, I said, looking at the empty road where the squad cars had vanished. He lit the fire 10 years ago. I just stopped being the wood. He nodded and walked away. I got into my car. It smelled like old gym clothes and vanilla air freshener. It smelled like my life. I sat there for a moment, listening to the rain drum on the roof. I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. Hello. A soft, sleepy voice answered. Grandma? I said, my voice finally cracking. Willow, she asked, waking up. Is everything all right? It's late. It's over, Grandma, I sobbed. The tears finally came, hot and fast. It's all over. He can't hurt us anymore. Oh, my brave girl, she whispered. My strong, brave girl. Come see me tomorrow. We'll have tea. I will, I promised. I'll bring the good cookies. I drove home. The city lights blurred through the rain. I wasn't the janitor anymore. I wasn't the disappointment. I was Willow Marcus. And for the first time in my life, that name belonged to me. But the story doesn't end when the handcuffs click. Real life isn't a movie. There are no credits that roll to hide the mess left behind. The next few months were a different kind of battle, the battle of dismantling the empire. The fallout was nuclear. The next morning, the headlines weren't about the gala. They were about the raid. Prominent surgeon arrested for charity fraud. $1 million grant rejected by state official, daughter turns whistleblower. My phone didn't stop ringing for weeks. Lawyers. Reporters. Random relatives I hadn't heard from in 20 years suddenly calling to ask if there was any money left. The answer was no. The investigation revealed a financial black hole that was staggering even to me. My father hadn't just embezzled the grant money, he was running a Ponzi scheme with his own practice. He had borrowed from Peter to pay Paul, and then borrowed from Paul to buy Brad a boat. The black fund he bragged about. It existed, but the feds seized it within 48 hours. It was mostly offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, containing about $2 million, money he had hidden while claiming poverty to the IRS. It was all gone. Seized for restitution, back taxes, and penalties. 3 months later, I stood on the sidewalk in front of the house of Marcus. It was a foreclosure auction. The massive iron gates were open. A for sale sign was staked into the manicured lawn. Strangers were walking through the front door, investors, flippers, curious neighbors wanting to see how the mighty had fallen. I walked inside. The house was empty. The furniture, the grandiose sofas, the antique tables, the pretentious oil paintings, had been sold off in a separate auction the week before. The house echoed. It smelled of dust and neglect. I walked into the library. The mahogany shelves were bare. The desk was gone. The only thing left was the fireplace. I walked over to the hearth. The bricks were still stained with soot. I crouched down and touched the cold ash. This was where he burned my letter. This was where he tried to burn me. It felt small. The room felt small. Without his booming voice and his expansive ego filling the space, it was just a room. Just wood and stone. Ms. Marcus. I turned. A real estate agent was standing in the doorway, looking nervous. I didn't know you were here. We're locking up soon. I'm just leaving, I said. I just wanted to check one thing. Did you want to bid? She asked awkwardly. The starting price is surprisingly low. The bank just wants to unload it. I looked around the room. I thought about the fear I had felt here. The humiliation. The years of walking on eggshells. No, I said. I don't want this house. It has termites. It does. She looked alarmed, checking her notes. Spiritual termites, I said. Tear it down. I walked out into the sunshine. I didn't look back. The legal proceedings dragged on for a year. My father rejected a plea deal at first, convinced he could charm the judge. His arrogance remained intact until the very end. But the evidence was overwhelming. The receipts I had kept, the photos, the emails Mrs. Gable saved, the recordings, were irrefutable. Dr. Anthony Marcus was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. Brad took a plea deal. He turned state's evidence against our father to reduce his sentence. He got 2 years in a minimum security facility, and 5 years of probation. The last time I saw my father was at the sentencing hearing. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. His hair was white, the expensive dye had grown out. He looked frail. When the judge read the sentence, my father didn't look at the judge. He looked at the gallery. He scanned the faces, looking for someone to sympathize with him. He saw me. I was sitting in the back row, next to Mrs. Gable. He locked eyes with me. I waited for the hate. I waited for the mouthing of curses. But he just slumped. He looked away. He realized, finally, that I wasn't the audience anymore. I was the author of the ending. I walked out of the courthouse and took a deep breath of fresh air. It was over. The debt was paid. I got into my car and drove to the Kensington. That's where my real life began. It's been 2 years since that night at the gala. Life is different now. Quieter. Better. I didn't get fired for what I did. In fact, the State Health Fund promoted me. They created a new division for audit and compliance, and they put me in charge. My job is literally to hunt down fraudsters who try to steal money from the poor. I'm good at it. I have a reputation. They call me the Iron Lady of Audit. I like it. I didn't buy a mansion. I bought a small cottage with a garden. It has big windows that let in the light. Grandma Rose lives with me now. She didn't want to stay at the facility anymore, and honestly, I wanted her close. We spend our evenings drinking tea and watching detective shows. She likes to critique the criminals. Amateurs, she says. They always forget to shred the receipts. We visit Brad occasionally. He's out on parole. He's working at a landscaping company, actual manual labor. He hates it, but he looks healthier. The drugs are gone. The arrogance has been replaced by a sullen kind of humility. We aren't close, and I don't think we ever will be, but he's my brother. I bring him sandwiches. I check on him. But I don't give him money. And my father. He sends letters from prison. Long, rambling letters written on yellow legal pads. At first, they were filled with rage. Blaming me. Blaming the government. Blaming the weather. I burned those. But lately, the tone has changed. He writes about the food. He writes about the books he's reading from the prison library. He complains that the other inmates don't respect his medical opinion. I don't visit him. I'm not ready for that. Maybe I never will be. Forgiveness is a journey, and I'm still packing my bags. I don't wish him harm, but I don't owe him my presence. I realize that my mental health is more important than his need for an audience. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. He was your father, they say. How could you do that to your own blood? And I tell them this, family isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about safety. It's about love. If someone uses their blood connection to drain you, to abuse you, to make you feel small so they can feel big, that's not family. That's a parasite. And you don't negotiate with parasites. You remove them. I kept the black folder. It sits on my bookshelf, right next to my master's degree. It reminds me of who I am. I am not a janitor. I am not a waste of genetics. I am a protector. I am a builder. And yes, sometimes I am a destroyer. But only of things that need to be broken so that something better can be built in their place. Grandma Rose was right. My father was a mirror, he only saw himself. I am a window. I look out. I see the world. I see the people who need help. And I see the liars who try to hurt them. And if you are one of those liars, if you are a bully hiding in a tuxedo, if you think your power protects you from the truth, watch out. Because the janitor is watching. And she kept the receipts. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story all the way to the end. I know it was a long journey, but I hope it gave you some strength. If you made it this far, you are truly special to me. Please comment the letter A below. Just the letter A. And if this story resonated with you, share it. Don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. Thank you.